In the late winter of 2011, I was getting all my gear together for my hike of the Appalachian Trail that I would start in March of that year. I spent hours online looking at gear lists and blogs to make sure that I had every last piece of equipment I could possibly need. One piece of equipment that I almost overlooked is trekking poles. Up until that point, I had done a number of hikes in the White Mountains of New Hampshire and other places all over New England, and I had never used trekking poles. I'd see other people on the trail using them, but for me it just seemed like another piece of unnecessary equipment, or a piece of equipment that somebody else needed. Thankfully, the day before I left for my hike, I thought a little bit harder about it, and I stopped in the local Kmart and I bought the cheapest pair of trekking poles I could find. The reason why I bought the cheapest pair of poles I could find was I still wasn't 100% convinced that I would actually need them. But when I showed up and I saw everybody else had trekking poles and started talking to some of the other hikers a little bit more, I realized that it really was an essential piece of gear. And once I learned how to use them properly, it really improved my hiking. Okay, this is the picture that I just showed you a few seconds ago. This is me and my friend Seth, and we were hiking in the North Carolina section of the Appalachian Trail. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at this picture so we can see what's actually going on with these trekking poles. These were the Kmart poles that I told you about earlier. I bought them for about $20, and I would call them low-quality equipment because they were heavy and sometimes they would randomly collapse on me, so that was no fun. Also, another issue here is bad technique. If you can see how I'm holding the poles, that's a problem too. So now I'll show you the correct way to hold trekking poles. The bad technique shown in the picture was me gripping hard onto the trekking pole like this. The correct way to do it is to adjust the strap properly, reach through from the bottom, and push down so the tension is on your wrist. This way you can grip the trekking pole loosely. Not only is this a more comfortable way to use the poles, but it also lets your hands react more quickly in case you should fall or need them in a hurry. Some other incorrect techniques I call the Lancelot and the Hurst shifter. Generally, the height of your trekking pole should be about waist high when held at a 90-degree angle from your arm. You might notice this picture also displays a double chin, but that's not necessary for proper technique. Here are those cheap trekking poles when they had reached the end of their life. The one on the left wouldn't extend anymore, and the tip had broken off. And after hundreds of miles of hiking, I actually started to wear down the metal on the end by a few inches. After using the cheap trekking poles for a couple of months, I eventually upgraded to these Lecky trekking poles. These were way lighter, and it seemed a lot more durable. They cost about $100, but I think it was worth the money because I still have them to this day. Like many other trekking poles, these are extendable in two different sections by twisting and pulling them. Previously I mentioned that waist high was a good length for your trekking poles, and that's true. But when you're going downhill, you might want to lengthen them a little bit, and if you're going uphill, you might want to shorten them by a few inches. This might just make them more comfortable. Up close you can see that these babies have definitely had some use. You can also see the carbide tip there. This is very useful for gripping onto rocks or digging in when the terrain is slick. But if it's a dry day, or you're on level terrain and you don't necessarily need that much grip, you might want to put on a rubber tip. This will help from tearing the trail apart and ruining it for hikers that are behind you. Trekking poles are useful for a number of reasons. One, going uphill, they help transfer some of the burden to your upper body because you can help pull yourself up a little bit. Going downhill, they're helpful because it takes some of the impact off your knees and helps you find your balance a little bit better. When you're crossing a river or stream, they can be used as just one more balance point. And also, over flat terrain, you can use them to help regulate your breathing and just get your upper body into it a little bit more. Thanks for watching, and keep your eye out for more videos in the future.